Hi, everyone,
Hello, everybody.
and welcome back to another episode of the Pretty Guilty Podcast.
Yes, we've been busy in trial land this week, haven't we? So
It has been
much,
a busy
a
week.
lot going on between Kohberger, Karen Reed, we have Diddy.
Yeah,
But today we're going to talk about Kohberger, do an
today,
update because,
yes, we had a trial hearing. No, I'm just kidding. We had a pre-trial hearing today. One of the last ones, the judge described it as the nuts and
I was going to
bolts.
say, yes, the nuts and bolts of what's coming. There's only one other hearing,
June
I
18th.
think 18th.
June
Yeah.
18th. There may be a couple other hearings.
We are getting super close, though, because the trial is slated to begin July 30th.
July 30th is when
Yes.
jury selection begins. Sorry, I was processing because I was like August 30th. And then I was like, wait, that's not right. That's why I looked at you. Looked over at me like, what is your
Instantly, I'm like, wrong date, wrong year. What did I say?
No, I was like, no, it's August 30th. And I'm like, wait, no, it's August 11th. Anyways, so jury selection begins July 30th. They're hoping for opening arguments on August 11th still. So,
Right. Which the judge actually said today in the hearing that he's going to limit the opening argument. So he wanted the prosecution and defense to discuss how long each of their opening arguments, how long they thought they would be, and then he would give an estimated time. But he said if it's essentially going to be 30 minutes to an hour, that's all he's going to give them, and he's timing. I mean, he's dialing things in tight.
this judge
Yeah.
is, and he has from the beginning, but he is letting them know before trial, there will be no BS in this case. There is nothing will be tolerated that is unnecessary. And I do appreciate that because of the seriousness of the case, the crime, the sensitivity of everything. He's really just no games, no egos. Get it together. And he has been.
He did say today, I don't like surprises. And he even discussed right down to how he's going to operate objections
Yeah.
when they object, when they can give any type of explanation. He says, if you object, I'm just going to basically sustain or overrule it.
I always say the defense is, I always throw spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Right.
They want to see what they can get away with and how far they can push the boundary. And that's every defense.
All they need, and we say this, I don't know, like every case, right? They need 1 ounce of reasonable doubt.
They're supposed to have, it's harder with these high profile cases, but yeah, they just need 1 ounce of reasonable doubt. It doesn't take a lot to get a hung jury, which a hung jury to the defense is better than a guilty jury.
Right.
So
This case is so different than, say, like Karen Reed that we're watching because there's so many different victims. They're young girls. Ethan was a young man. I mean, we're all like parents, brothers, sisters, grandparents,
it's a very
friends.
relatable case.
Yes.
Everybody knows they can put themselves either in the shoes of the victim or the shoes of the families of the victim.
Right. And even Kohberger's parents, I mean, I have some compassion for because they didn't do this crime.
Absolutely.
And I always say it's the people around you that are really the casualties. Of course, we have the true victims that, in this. But then everybody else that circles around it too, as well, is sort of the aftermath of it. And they're sort of left just to come in and clean it up, which is, it's gut wrenching. It's literally guttural. Sometimes I think about it. I'm like, gosh, everybody involved is so sad. I mean, not the person who did it, but
Never
for sure. No, never.
So we want to go over the hearing first. We want to touch on what that Dateline episode shared with us, some new details from Dateline. But before that, the hearing did happen this morning, and we want to try and get this video out really quickly so we can talk about what exactly were the key points. There wasn't a ton of new details about the case necessarily that came out, but there were a couple touch points. So let's start there with, I feel the biggest point from the case is the alternate perpetrator, which we see also happening in the Karen Reed trial right now as well. So the alternate perpetrator.
Yeah. And just on a side note, the Karen Reed trial, they refer to it as third-party culprit. So here it's the alternate perpetrator. Essentially, they mean the same thing. The defense says that they have somebody else that they believe that they can prove is the suspect and the one who actually committed the crime.
And this judge, well, also it's, I feel like, more of a common sense thing here, but the judge is making clear that if you want to present this to court, you have to have a backing, a foundation to support this. You can't just come into court and say that you know who it is, that did this crime and just throw anybody's name out there, especially the sensitivity of this case with how high profile. You bring one person into this, that person's life is changed forever. Internet sleuths, as the judge says. So
he came hard for people, kind of in the media even too, but especially people on the internet. He didn't want juror information to get out because then he said internet sleuths would try and find out who that juror was, and he wants to make sure that the jurors are protected, at all costs. I think in a case of this magnitude, we compare it to try and find a third-party culprit to Karen Reed. They're two different types of cases. I think it's there's so much more on a foundation and much larger amounts of evidence in Karen Reed, but in this case, so they have a name, they have a whole motive, they have all of this, but they didn't provide enough information to the judge.
Well, what the defense said was essentially that this case is full of alternate perpetrators and that it could be anyone, essentially, is really what they said. But obviously they have names, but to be dramatic, that's really what they're saying is really there's so many people who could be an alternate suspect in this case.
Right. They still have to lay a foundation, though. That's the problem is
course.
I feel like they came to the judge and there was like, oh, there's this thingy and this person could be responsible, thinking that the judge was going to say, okay, that's fine. Go ahead and enter it in and present it with your defense.
Yeah.
But generally in these, when this happens, there has to be some kind of foundation laid or I guess, information to support how they came up with this theory. There's the word theory.
Theory. Let's get a dictionary. Well, and I think it is important, especially just in any case, but especially in this case, due to, again, the sensitivity of it. Because if he were, I mean, really, I don't believe the defense is wrong by saying there are tons of people who could be connected and made to look like a suspect. I think there's circumstances everywhere that, I mean, let's talk about the DoorDasher or the Uber Eats driver or the Uber who dropped off, the victims. There are lots of people who could have been connected to the case that if the defense wanted to, I'm certain could throw it out there. This is the last known person to be at the residence. How do we know that they weren't the ones? Because they were the Uber Eats driver literally probably passed the suspect on his way out. So how do we know that he wasn't the one who did it? And, they could really go into court and say just about anybody's name. So it's really important that the judge is laying that out there of if you're going to bring this into court, we're going to make sure there's reason to do it. And we're not just going to let you do whatever you want.
Not to mention there's a lot of discussion about did he do it alone? So there was that motion, right, that we saw. We were reading through that about how they did a run through of the home. Right. And they were saying that it was plausible and that could happen, that the murders could have been committed in that time frame. But then it poses a question of they did a run through these, a police officer did a run through or a detective, I'm not sure exactly who did it, but law enforcement. They ran through the home as empty. They'd already been in the home. They know the floor plan. We don't know if the suspect had been in the home prior to the crime. So how are we going to compare? And in that aspect, how many timed runs did they do? And were they ready, set, go? They knew what they were trying to accomplish going in there.
They knew what they were accomplishing, just like the suspect. He knew what he wanted to accomplish. However, the thing with that's a bit of it, I guess you could call it more of a bias in the sense is these people knew the layout of the home. They knew exactly where they were going. There was no furniture in the home. They knew exactly where their victims were. They knew exactly if there was going to be a surprise or not a surprise. Right. Whereas this perpetrator entered the home. Allegedly, Kohberger or the suspect had never been in the home before. So this is a very unique layout. This person is running around not knowing where they're going, opening doors, not realizing there's going to be surprise people like Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, allegedly, possibly killing more people than was intended to. Right. I don't know that it was so cut and dry. Like the detectives were able to do so quickly. However, they're saying that it's possible. So,
I mean, anything is possible. We have to take everything into consideration with all the evidence. Yeah. The other aspect of that is, as we learned through Dateline, that not only did all of that occur, but then also the suspect sat down because whoever did this got tired at one point. There was some carving in Ethan's legs. So there's more activity that is coming out that actually occurred inside the home. at the time of the crime. So when they're doing a run through, are they recreating every
Right.
bit of that is what my question is on it. So
Yeah.
just another interesting aspect. But then it goes back to what the defense is saying on the alternate perpetrator. Could there have been somebody who helped him? Was there a getaway driver? I mean,
Yeah.
it's so many different things to take
Into
a look at.
consideration.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the next thing that they talked about in the court hearing today was Dylan and Bethany, and they made clear that there were 2 seats that were going to be saved for Dylan and Bethany. The judge did. He said, regardless of if they decide to show up or not, the seats will be saved through the entirety of the trial for both of them.
Yep.
Speaking of seats being saved.
Right. Real quick on a note of what the judge had said regarding Dylan and Bethany, he did make sure to acknowledge them as victims.
Yes.
But what was interesting is he acknowledged them as victims of the burglary.
Yeah.
However, either way, they are victims of this.
Which they are victims. And because of the sensitivity of this case and because the backlash that they've gotten and the fact that they're victims, the judge wants to protect Dylan and Bethany. So he said that they are the only people that will be considered for now to be on the stand, that will be audio only, no video during the trial.
Correct. The state did, I'm sorry, actually the defense originally asked for, I take that it was the state, sorry, let me go back. The state did ask for their certain law enforcement officers to also be excluded for video, referring to ones who conduct covert
Undercover,
yeah,
I guess,
like
if you will.
yeah, aka undercover, because he said obviously it would blow their cover. The judge sort of took it under consideration very lightly though, and said he would consider he'll think about it.
Sleep on.
He said if they had conducted covert operations in this case, then he would consider it. But if they had not, then he said it was pretty much likely going to be off the table. Then the defense stood up and said, well, the state and I spoke this morning and said that there's other witnesses on the list that we would maybe want to protect because of the high profile of this case. But I'm so sorry. This isn't the only high profile case.
Well, the judge wasn't really here for it. The judge
No, he
said,
was
listen,
not.
we're going to do Dylan and Bethany, and then you guys, if you present a strong enough case as to why these people don't need to be on camera, then I guess, but good luck.
No, yeah, only for law enforcement though, because the other witnesses that the defense and the state kind of both agreed, well, can we just have a few here? And the next thing you know, it's like 2 more here, 2 more here. And then the whole thing is in private. He said, you're going to have to really try hard to convince me because the public has a right to see this. And so he has to err on the side of caution of what is considered a fair trial. But at the same time, there are, the public does, or I should say the public is allowed to have access. So I don't think he's going to do it for those other witnesses for sure. There's no way you got me convinced that he's going to be like, yeah, that's fine. We'll just this one and this one at all.
He's not a pushover of a judge.
Which is so funny because watching the hearings with him, he's very casual. Like usually proceedings are a lot more formal. It's like he's literally sitting there with a cup of coffee practically and just like, so guys, what do you want to talk about today? He's just, but I feel like he's more approachable like that too as well. But he doesn't mess around for sure.
I like it. They need some of that.
Yeah.
Especially these attorneys, sometimes they get a little.
Boston.
Yeah, if we can get this in the Karen Reed trial,
I mean,
how do we petition for this judge?
Imagine it would be a whole different kind of trial. It's all based on the judge, right?
Truly.
I feel like it's so true.
Don't even get us started on Karen Reed. Okay?
No, we won't go down that rabbit hole.
Daily.
You're trying to,
yeah.
We're trying to stay focused on Kohberger. I mean, honestly, we're like, ping, 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 ping.
It's a lot right now. Then you add Diddy into the mix. So.
I know, but
the last point that they talked about in the hearing today that we wanted to touch on was the dollhouse. So they recreated a dollhouse of the Idaho 4 home since it is demolished. And the judge did rule that they could use this dollhouse, this rendering of the crime scene, but only during times that it's applicable. So when it's relevant, it will be in the courtroom. When it's not in the courtroom,
then it'll just be stored in somewhere like on the 3rd floor. They'll have it in the courthouse, but he also
in a vault, in an evidence
vault. Yes. However, he did mention that as they were referring it to a dollhouse, I think they all collectively agreed that that wasn't appropriate because it sounds it sounds very gimmicky. Like this is a dollhouse is something you
So it sounds
play
like
in.
you're making fun of.
Right. So they
This.
agreed to call it a rough model because he said it was not true to scale of the actual house, but the floor plan is supposed to be similar. I like the word similar.
Similar.
I just don't know how I feel about this whole model
I know.
aspect.
It's going to be very interesting. However, the defense did have it examined. What's the word?
Yeah,
I'm
the two
looking for?
experts in there yesterday.
Two
Yeah.
different experts examined the dollhouse. I don't even like calling it a dollhouse, but the rendering.
The model.
The
The
model.
rough model, we'll call it,
Yes.
because that's what they're referring it to now.
To make
So
sure that everything looked to scale, and so far, so good.
it also gives the defense enough time to object if there's something that they don't like, which I feel like
Absolutely.
they will find
Do you
something
think
for
that
sure.
they should have torn down the home?
I don't think so at this point. I think it would have been very important for the jurors to be able to take a look at it. I understand they can do a rendering. I feel like it's something so different than looking at something that literally dolls can be in, and you can like oh hey, I don't know. It seems very I don't think that they should have taken down that house. I don't think they should have allowed it. But at the same standpoint, I understand it was the university that wanted it taken down because they have college students that attend school and they live close by.
Well, they
It's
felt
just
like it was becoming a tourist attraction.
Right.
It was becoming very hard for the neighborhood, the community.
But I'm so sorry. If those are my kids and you say that you're upset because it's a tourist attraction, well, I've just lost a child. So you know what? Tourist or not, I just don't care.
We just saw it in the Karen Reed trial. We saw that the jurors in the first trial and the second trial, they went to the crime scene. This happens when...
It happens a lot in cases.
Yeah, I believe that with how unique that floor plan was, the jurors being inside that home to be able to see how this crime was committed, walking in the path that they believed that the intruder walked in, seeing the unique floor plan, seeing how Dylan saw it, I think it could have changed probably both the prosecution and the defense case in some way.
Well, I think especially because we have such a limited timeline, that to me made it so important for them to be able to go inside the home and actually physically walk through it. They're not going to be able to do that. I think at the end of the day, it can hurt the prosecution by not having it. It could also hurt the defense too. It depends on how the jurors really take it. But I feel like it was important to keep it. That's just my thought.
I agree as well. I don't know. It's always sat really weird with me that they so quickly demolish that home.
No, I mean, there's cases where evidence will not be taken down, a home, a building, a vehicle, nothing for years.
Yeah.
And the way that they're willing to take it down so quickly just bugs me.
And again, I hate to keep bringing it back to Karen Reed, but they still have the car and they go to the crime scene and they take the actual car to the crime scene and they drive it around and they're driving the jurors around. And it just, to me, it feels, it's not like it's the most unheard of thing ever. And I believe that for additional testing, for additional anything that they may have needed in that home, to have it until after the trial and then to tear it down, absolutely. Why would they want that up in the community? I absolutely understand them wanting to tear it down.
I'm curious how the victims' families feel about that, because I can understand them wanting that just to be torn down and gone. I wonder how they feel about it.
We don't really have to wonder how Kaylee's family feels, because they're pretty much the only family that's outspoken.
Correct.
The family that I'd love to hear from is Ethan's family, but I respect so much how they've handled all of this. They just want to mourn their amazing son in peace and not be involved in the circus and any part of it. And I respect that so much. I would love to hear from Ethan's family about their feelings and their thoughts about this, because they're so private. And I think that's really great. You have Xana's family, who also has not spoken out a ton. Maddie's family has spoken out a little bit here and there.
Right.
But I find it very, very intriguing about Ethan's family wanting to take such a large step back.
I just think it's how people process things differently.
Yeah.
And people heal in many different ways. And maybe some feel like they have to stand up for justice and in a more outspoken, vocal way. Other people kind of become a recluse.
Yeah.
I would probably be more of the recluse though.
I feel yeah, I
I would
respect it
be.
so much because I'm sure that they feel so much disrespect from so many different places that have come from this whole spectacle. I like to think I would be the recluse, but I hate to say I would probably be out of my mind. So
Oh,
I don't know that I would
completely
be
out
able
of
to
your brain.
just be quiet. I think I would be a little mix of,
Maybe a little bit of both.
yeah, only
Yeah.
speaking out when I felt like I need to, but also I just will never let somebody ever hurt my family and just sit back and say like, okay, well, we'll just let it happen. And that's not what Ethan's family is doing either.
Oh
I
no,
just,
I
I
mean,
tend to be a little bit insane
yeah.
when it comes
I
to my baby.
It's one thing.
Absolutely.
So it's one thing I think if it's, prior to and you're fighting for your child's life to save them, then yeah, gloves off, shoes off, everything's off. When it's after the fact, I think then you're mourning and it's a different aspect I think to it as well. So everybody
Absolutely.
definitely handles it differently. The other thing
And
is
so much respect. I just have to say, there is no handbook
no.
for how you handle losing a child or anybody, but especially a child. So everybody grieves differently, and you just can't judge a parent or a family member on how they handle this type of situation. So it's so much respect to all of the families. There are different styles. I'm just insane, but I'm also private. I'm an insane private person, so I would just be a mixture.
I know, like highs and lows. You know, speaking of that, I think what's interesting is Dylan and her aspect because people have really, I think, supported, but then also come for her a little bit too as well. And I think that's why the judge said what he did today in the hearing was like, hey, let's remember that they are victims too. I feel like saying that they're a victim of a burglary is kind of very low level. I feel like what they went through was quite a bit more than just like, oh, our home got broken into. I mean, it's
Minimizing their traumas and their
exactly. I didn't
experiences.
like that, but he wasn't doing it to be
Offensive.
offensive in any way. He was actually trying to defend it. Like they deserve this, and
He feels like he wants to protect them.
right, exactly. The way it
It's
came
jarring to
across.
hear it that
Yeah,
way.
like, oh, this wasn't just a burglary. It seems like such a low level crime. Not that anybody who's been
Yeah.
burglarized, I mean, we have, that it's an easy thing, but compared to the magnitude, I think it was just
Right.
like so different. But at the end of the day, it's just, I think we all just want justice. And if Kohberger is guilty, then he's guilty. And if not, then we want to make sure whoever did this is found. If he didn't do it alone, who was with him? How did this happen? And just making sure that, we really take a look at all the evidence as it comes in.
Yeah. So speaking of the evidence as it comes in,
Yes.
let's get into the Dateline episode.
Mhm.
It's been not a week yet since the Dateline episode came out, but we still wanted to cover it and talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we felt was important to touch on. So, two of the major takeaways for me personally from this Dateline episode, number one was being able to finally see that surveillance video from the neighbor's house, the
That was
video
huge. Yeah.
of the alleged car circling around the neighborhood multiple times, almost working up the gumption to do this crime, just hyping himself up. And then you see finally he does this U-turn, and it was like he said, all right, it's time, it's now
That's
or
like
never.
go time.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting to see. The number one takeaway for me, again, personally, was the audio. Now, we have heard this audio before. It was never confirmed to be true, and it was always a little fuzzy. But the audio is from a neighboring camera next to the home.
It was much clearer this time.
Very clear,
Yeah.
very loud and clear. And it is muffled whimpering. You hear a loud thud, and you hear Murphy, which is Kaylee's dog, who was on the third floor in Kaylee's bedroom when they found him. He was in Kaylee's bedroom on the third floor when the police arrived and discovered him, but you could hear Murphy barking. And I think that if you've had a dog, even if you haven't had a dog, you know when a dog's bark is aggressive.
I mean, the thing was about the bark is it was so loud and just like you said, aggressively, very
Like there was an intruder, or
right.
there was something happening that he was alerted. Very defensive. There was so much discord.
It almost sounded like the dog was outside.
I mean, it's just, it felt like it was so clear. Like
Right.
I was standing right
like
next
right
to
there.
Murphy.
Like at first, when I first heard it, I had to listen to it a few times because sometimes when people say this is what it is, then I'm like, I don't know. Let me listen again because I thought, are we sure it's not a neighbor's dog outside that was barking from the car driving by? Or, so I wanted to listen to it a few times because it was that like vivid, being so close
Yeah.
is what it sounded like. It was
Yeah. And
wild.
there's been a lot of discourse throughout the years, especially more towards the beginning. Did Murphy bark or didn't he?
Hmm.
I remember one time I was in a live where there were people jumping in. There were so many people in the live, and people were like, I own a golden doodle and they don't bark. I own a golden doodle and mine barks. And it was
But
this discourse
yeah,
back and forth on if golden doodles bark in
I mean,
general
it's a
when they're
dog.
fearful. Yeah, and my standpoint, I've never owned a golden doodle, but my standpoint has always been just like a mother has instincts, so does a dog.
They do.
And there are, you hear of dogs who cower when fear, comes, when they're fearful. But most dogs, if there's an intruder in a home, they're barking and
Right.
they're letting you know that they are there. Especially, he's a pretty good sized dog. So there was a lot of discourse throughout the years of if Murphy barked or if he didn't bark. We've heard this audio before. I've always felt like Murphy would protect Kaylee or anybody in that
I
home.
think animals in general, especially dogs, are so much more intuitive than even humans because they can sense storms coming.
Yeah.
They almost can sense trouble in a certain way.
So can women though. That woman's
I mean,
intuition.
listen, woman's intuition, a mom and a woman.
No, that women's intuition is crazy, but dogs, they're very intuitive. They hear their senses, their smell is all very heightened. And I think in
I
that
think the
instance,
difference and sometimes the confusion is that sometimes they think just because if he barked, they would assume that if he were to be barking as aggressively that he would have attacked. Not all dogs attack, but they
Right.
can bark and it's like alert, alert, danger, danger is what
Like
they're
a
trying to
chihuahua,
say.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
they bark, but they don't.
Mhm.
Well, you could get some ankle biters, but they don't necessarily attack. They just shake
Right.
in place. So yeah, it's sad because you understand it. What are your thoughts on the audio?
My thoughts on the audio is it really adds a couple different layers to the fact that we know Murphy barked and at what point, like, then you wonder where was the perpetrator at inside the home.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, was it the noise that alerted Murphy? Was it when he
Well, and also
saw the suspect?
my thought is, again, this is just me trying to use logic. Was Murphy in the room with Maddie and Kaylee? Because certainly you don't really lock a dog in a room by itself for the most part. Sometimes you do, but I just wonder, was Murphy in the room with Maddie and Kaylee? Because again, with the discourse around everybody's speculation was that the perpetrator put Murphy in Kaylee's room, which is across from Maddie's room. I don't believe that if the dog was in with Maddie and Kaylee, that he
I
wouldn't have
don't.
alerted that there was somebody there. They wouldn't have been asleep when the perpetrator walked in. So maybe Kaylee put Murphy in her room. I'm not certain. I just always
I
wonder
don't
about,
think.
was Murphy roaming around? Was he in the room with them? Was he already in Kaylee's room separately while they were trying to sleep? So I always get really curious about that. But I mean, I guess I feel terribly for Murphy because he probably witnessed, definitely heard a lot of things that poor dog should have never had to hear.
I think in my mind, I've always thought that Murphy was not in a room, but that's like I was saying earlier, is where was he at? Was he barking because of the noise? Like he sensed trouble just from hearing something in the house because again, that tuition, they have really good hearing. Or was it once the suspect entered into the room? I feel like Murphy was not in another room. And I think if they tried to put him in another room, he kind of would have fought. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
given the audio, we know the order of it. I mean, Murphy was definitely barking because of what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
Who was it that was on the audio?
Right.
Is the audio longer than that small snippet? Because that snippet was already released. I also wonder, so like with the Ring camera, usually they only really start recording when there's motion. So was there motion that picked up the audio, that, tricked the camera to pick up the audio? Is that why the audio is not longer? Is the audio longer? What else did the audio pick up?
But that's why when I heard the audio, like I said, I played it several times because in my mind, it didn't really make sense that this was a dog inside the house barking, because like you said, the Ring camera is motion activated. It was very loud, very just vivid, as if it was close to that camera.
Yeah.
And again, they said that it was Murphy. But in my mind, who has confirmed this for certain, And I think that's some of my question.
It could be a neighborhood dog hearing the commotion.
I mean, it could be. So I think
Murphy was in the house.
well, he was in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I would think that the dog would bark, but then it goes back to some of the questions that, I wonder, they haven't released that information yet. So I wonder if Dylan or Bethany heard Murphy barking at any time.
Do you feel like these types of things should have the video of the perpetrator, the audio? Do you think that these things should have been released at trial? Do you find it to be harmful to come out this early?
Sure. And that was one of the things actually that the judge spoke about today at the hearing, was the concern of certain information getting out prior to the trial, because any information that gets disseminated can be used and then it's being glorified in the media. And if people do not use it in the proper format, just even talking about it or just even putting it out there, it really could create problems, because remember, we have to find a jury that's unbiased, which the judge said today, which I thought was really interesting too, is he said regarding the jury questionnaire, the judge had said that he wanted to have enough questions, but not too many. So he was looking for a balance. And I don't know if that's him admittedly in a roundabout way saying, I don't think we're going to fully get an unbiased jury. We have to try and do the best that we can. But he's very adamant about protecting the jury, to the point where during the voir dire, they're going to have a small room where they'll allow media, and then they'll, in a closed caption, or closed recording is what it's called. Then in another room, they'll air it in another room in the courthouse, but they won't allow that to be aired live, because they want to make sure that no information gets out about the jury, which, and they, one side thing too, they also talked about sequestration, remember? And at this point, they're not wanting to sequester, but they are reserving the right to do that. So while they do question the jury, letting them be aware, like, are you okay to be sequestered? Because if it gets to that point, which I have a feeling it's going to be honest.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
So moving on to the third big point, which I think is really important to talk about, is the target. In the Dateline episode, they're alleging, and it's alleged because it has not come out in trial and not come from any actual reputable source. It's not that Dateline isn't a reputable source, but you know what I'm saying. Dateline came out and said that they believe Maddie was the target of this attack. I have always been I've always been pretty on the side of Maddie or Kaylee. The only reason why I would sway to Kaylee, was because Kaylee just so happened to be back in town this weekend before she was moving away. So if there was somebody who was longing after Kaylee and wanting to do this crime, knew she was in town, this would be their only moment, right? However, it made more sense that it was Maddie.
I think it makes more sense that Maddie to me.
Well, you think about if a perpetrator walked inside the home, not knowing the layout of the house, Maddie's room would be the easiest to find, because on the back of the house where Maddie's room was located, in her window, there was an initial of the letter M and then a pink boot. So anybody could reasonably assume that that's Maddie's room. On top of, if she had her blinds open, that person could go in that back parking lot, park back there and look in and see, where her room would be.
Didn't they come out with some information in the beginning of this and showing previously that they actually did leave their blinds open and it was fairly easy to see inside the home?
I'm not certain about that, but they're college kids, okay?
There's
100%
I do remember
their blinds open.
Yeah, I do remember seeing some stuff. And I think as an investigator, I saw that. And I know you and I had a conversation and we were like, their blinds are open all the time. The
number one thing as private investigators that we have encountered is people leave their blinds open, and if your blinds are open and you're watching this right now, go close your blinds.
Go close your blinds and keep them closed when it's dark.
Anytime the sun starts to go down, please close your blinds. You are a stalker or an investigator's dream. Truly.
Yes.
Go close your blinds. But yeah, and so it's easy from the outside of a home to see where Maddie's room might be located, you know, especially you understand, okay, she's on the second floor. You hit the stairs. You understand there's 2 rooms. One room is vacant because Kaylee's pretty much moved out. And then Maddie should be in her room. So there are 2 things. Either the person was going straight towards Maddie's room, just not expecting Kaylee to be in there, or they checked Kaylee's room. She wasn't in there. Murphy was. And then moved to Maddie's room. But Steve Gonzalez said this in the beginning, one of his very first interviews, and it'll always be like just embedded in my memory.
Brain,
yeah, he said he didn't have to go upstairs. He said the perpetrator did not have to go upstairs, meaning if Xana, Ethan, Dylan, or Bethany were the target, the perpetrator would not have to have gone up those stairs. And if this was a stalker situation and those were the targets, they would more than likely probably know which room they stayed in. Also, guys, Zillow, there was a Zillow listing again with the layout of the home. People may say, well, how would he know the layout of the home? Between being a stalker, social media posts, you had a Zillow listing. I know this because I was on the Zillow listing when this happened. The Zillow listing has been taken down now. But my mom and I sat for hours looking at this home.
Went through the whole layout.
Yeah.
We did.
Looking at the photos of the home, trying to understand this, trying to process this.
I mean, if Kohberger did this, he's a criminology student. So he understands piecing evidence together, information, photos. You learn, about crime scenes. I mean, I have my degree in criminal justice, so I understand what they teach you when you're in school. So he had the foundation already to understand how to process this information. So I think it was fairly truthfully easy for him to figure it out, even though the layout is a little bit funky.
Yeah.
I think it was
in a simple way. All he knew is that he needed to go upstairs. In a more complicated way, he walked in and said, all right, well, let's try upstairs first, And
I know there's a lot of talk that they were saying that he was not in the home prior to. We cannot confirm or deny.
Yeah.
But I cannot rule out that it isn't a possible thing, because I get he's awkward and people say, oh, they would have never known. They would have noticed him because he is so socially awkward.
He's older.
But there's so many people that come in and out of that home that he could have snuck in and been there for a half hour. Maybe somebody didn't know.
Well, in the Dateline episode, you see this woman who had a conversation with Kohberger about hiking and things of the sort. And she said, I would have never thought twice about that conversation ever again until this happened. And it's one of those things where when you're drunk, intoxicated on substances of any type, and there's a person in front of you, the chances of you really vividly remembering that person is slim to none. I mean, Dylan herself came face to face with the intruder and was shown a picture of Kohberger and said, I've never seen this person in my life. So to say that nobody in the house would have seen him if he was there, when there's so many people in the house, intoxicated, on substances of any type there's all these types of people and intoxications and all the things. It's not hard to say that he could have snuck in one night with his hoodie up and just meandered around and nobody would have noticed.
And they seem like friendly girls. Like they
seem so
they were
sweet
living
and
life, just having a good time. I can't see. Yeah, I feel like they would have been like,
not in a gathering where anybody could have been there. If it was invite only and they showed up, anybody would be like, who are you?
I mean,
but there was an instance on body cam where the police showed up and the roommates weren't even home.
And nobody knew where they were. And
they finally got a hold of Maddie, but none of the roommates were even there.
And they had a ton of people inside their house. Yeah. So I cannot fully subscribe to the fact that he was in there or whether he was not.
Yeah.
I mean, I get he's looks socially awkward, so I understand he could maybe
socially awkward guy. And it's a small town, one of those towns where everybody knows everybody, and I understand that too.
But there's a lot of sororities. There's just all these different type of places over there because it is such a college town that people are just trying to like fit in. So who knows? I mean, it doesn't mean he was the only socially awkward person around, and I think that's a thing that people kind of forget.
Yeah. So the last 2 things that I really want to touch on happened really with Ethan and Xana. So we found out through Dateline, and again, this is all alleged. It's a pretty reputable source here, but this is alleged, so we have to say allegedly, that the perpetrator so aggressively unalived Ethan with one puncture to an artery, just one stab wound to an artery, which left a pool of blood. That after this happened, the perpetrator carved what we don't know,
Correct.
carved into Ethan's leg, and then sat down in a chair.
They were exhausted, took a break essentially. We don't know how long of a break though, right?
We don't know how long this person sat in the chair. We don't know how long the perpetrator had sat for, but what I'm very curious about is how they knew that the perpetrator sat. Is it because there was blood that was transferred from the perpetrator's pants onto the chair that made some type of print indicating that he sat?
I don't know as far as what evidence they had to support that. We don't have any information that has been put out yet. So I don't feel like I can intelligently give an opinion or a thought to it, because in my mind, it doesn't resonate that they don't really have any DNA that's matched him other than what the sheath, right? It through his dad. So if he sat down in blood or he sat down, like what evidence do they have to support that?
Yeah.
I think if hopefully that will come, I would assume, out at trial if they're going to use that as evidence, because I just don't feel like we have enough information yet to really give a solid answer.
Yeah.
That's my thought on it.
I feel like it shows you how much we just don't know yet.
Right.
With the carving, what do you think he carved into Ethan?
Again, I mean,
initials. Maybe it's what if it's Maddie's initials?
I don't really feel, I could be wrong. I don't really feel like it's initials because it's not as if it were a revenge type of.
Well, what Dateline is alleging is the perpetrator did it out of, I guess, kind of like rebellion or I guess anger towards Ethan, because this was supposed to be a crime against women, and then Ethan was there.
Right.
So showed an extreme amount of aggression towards Ethan, because from what we're understanding from Dateline, he did not do this to any of the women.
I mean, and I would agree that that makes sense. For me, I don't think it was initials. I think it would be something else, like a message, a drawing, something of that nature that would be a lot more meaningful to the perpetrator. Like it's something that means something to him, but nobody else knows, is kind of how I take it. But I think this is where we have to be very careful because we don't have enough information. And so when we're looking at where did Dateline get this information from, obviously they have their sources, but they didn't include enough information that this is where it gets dangerous, because then people start talking about it.
Absolutely.
And presumptions get brought up, people start assuming, and then this is so catastrophic for the trial. And when we're trying to find jurors, and this is where I think we just really, really have to be careful to say we don't have enough information to answer any of those questions yet.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And devastating to have to, as Ethan's family, have to listen to this come out. To hear about it must be so gut-wrenching.
I mean, it really is, especially because with Dateline, you know, I mean, I've done television shows like Discovery ID. I've been on various episodes to record, and they edit things and they try and, you know, everything I say is factual and true, but these episodes are edited to a certain narrative of what they want. And so we just have to be very cautious with them too as well. While we do learn new information that does come out, we still don't know really how to apply it yet. And we aren't going to know until the trial comes and this evidence comes out, which is also a slippery slope because there's some things that aren't allowed in as evidence that we do learn outside ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so it's just trying to weigh that. But really, if you're trying to look at it in the proper perspective, you're supposed to look at it in the mind of a juror, right? And so that's, I think, the hard thing where it gets kind of dangerous in a way.
I do completely agree. It's going to be interesting to see what else comes out at trial, because I am geared up for a lot more information. If this is what we're getting now, it's going to be very pivotal to see what comes out at trial.
Yes, because the trial is projected to be approximately 3 months. So we figure there is going to be a lot of evidence that we have no clue.
Yeah.
And so I think we just have to, some of it, reserve our thoughts until then and not try and egg
Yeah.
on certain things that are not beneficial, especially for the families and the victims.
Well, it's good to have an open discussion, but then
Yes,
there
absolutely.
becomes a point where it's speculation and you just have to cut it off. So, you know, we don't love doing a ton of speculation. If we wanted to be a speculation podcast, a tea podcast with Karen Reed, with any type of case, we could do it all day, but it's not beneficial to anyone, especially the victims, especially the victims' families, and the people who we're speculating about. If it's not true, and if we're way off base, it's just very harmful.
Right.
So you can talk about maybe those things behind closed doors with your families. And
Right,
you
right.
can really be like, did you hear this? And what do you think about this? But
Yeah.
this podcast is meant to be more factual based. And we like to read straight from the transcripts, any type of paperwork, documents, and really try and bring you guys that.
Yeah.
So the trial
true.
is gearing up. We're
getting very, very close for sure.
very close.
Yeah.
So we're very excited to finally be able to see into what it is that this case really is. Hopefully it can vindicate people who need to be vindicated. Hopefully it incriminates people who need to be incriminated.
Yep, absolutely. On a side note, real quick on what you were just saying, it also, the defendant has the right to a fair trial, because what if somebody's wrongfully convicted? I'm not saying he is or he isn't. I'm just saying that they have a right to a fair trial as well, because then anything that goes wrong, he or a defendant, she, whoever it is, has the right to appeal. And you would hate somebody who is guilty to be released on an appeal issue. And that's even worse. But let's not forget, people get wrongfully convicted too. So right now, I think it's so important to look at all the evidence at face value as it's going to be presented in the trial. But lots of discussion in the meantime, for sure. When I say that, just mean like cautious discussion for sure. Yeah.
Healthy discussion that is in the parameters of facts.
Right.
And evidentiary support.
Ooh, go Elwoods. Love some Legally Blonde.
Yes. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the podcast, like the episode. Follow us on socials. We're trying to be more active. We're working on it.
I know, a lot more active. And we do have quite a few more podcasts coming up. We're going to be discussing an update on Karen Reed for the week. It was kind of a slower week. And also we have a Diddy podcast we will be doing for sure.
It's going to be tough, but it's good. It's good to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good to talk about. So we have all of that coming up. We're trying to pump out episodes for you guys, hitting all of the topics right now because there's so many to talk about.
I know. It's like a ping pong. Ping, ping.
No, truly. It is so much to intake. But
it's all important, right?
There's all so important.
So many important aspects of it. Each one is so different.
Bringing the facts. That's the most important.
Yeah.
So truly, I think our Diddy episode is going to be one of our longest. That's for sure.
There's a lot to discuss there for sure. So thank you for taking the time with us once again. And we hope you are there on the next one.
And you guys have a blessed rest of your week. We will see you guys soon.